What if I told you that the same white powder sitting on your kitchen shelf, the one you use to clean your sink or neutralize odors in your refrigerator, could actually support healthy blood flow and vascular function throughout your body? I know that sounds unexpected, but I mean it. Because in my 13 years of working specifically with men's health, I've seen thousands of men over 60, including many from my own patient roster, experience meaningful improvements in their circulation, their physical responsiveness, and their overall confidence from something as accessible and inexpensive as baking soda. My name is Dr. Laura. I'm 35 years old, and I've spent the last 13 years in clinical practice focused exclusively on male health, addressing the kinds of issues most men don't feel comfortable bringing up in a standard doctor's visit: poor circulation, vascular sluggishness, hormonal fatigue, low energy, and the emotional weight that comes with a body that no longer feels like it's working with you. I've also lectured and written on integrative approaches to men's health, and I firmly believe that the most effective medicine doesn't always come with a prescription label. Sometimes it's already in your home. Here's something most men are never told. Baking soda is far more than a cleaning agent or a remedy for heartburn. When used correctly, it can support nitric oxide availability, improve how your red blood cells transport oxygen, help balance your body's internal pH, and even enhance the way your cells respond to testosterone. All of these are foundational to healthy vascular and physical function, especially for men over 60. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 10 science-supported ways that baking soda can help older men rebuild their vitality, restore their physical strength, and reconnect with the confidence that aging can quietly erode. And a little later, I'll share a specific morning combination that one of my patients used with results that genuinely impressed me. Before we get into it, if you're a man over 60 who's interested in natural, evidence-informed approaches to staying strong, energized, and physically capable, go ahead and hit subscribe and turn on the bell notification. There's a lot more content like this coming your way, and if this topic resonates with you, type the number 1 in the comments. If it doesn't quite land, type 0. I read every response, and your feedback directly shapes what I cover next. Alright, let's start with the first way. Baking soda can support stronger vascular function in men over 60, and it has everything to do with your blood's pH level. Most men are completely unaware of this, but as the body ages, its internal chemistry can gradually shift toward the acidic end of the spectrum. And that shift, even when it's subtle, has a direct effect on blood vessel behavior and the quality of circulation throughout the body. Benefit number 1: balances your blood pH to improve circulation. The first patient I want to tell you about is Harold. He was 69 years old, recently retired, and visibly frustrated when he came in. Not just with his energy levels, but with something deeper that he struggled to put into words at first. After a long pause, he finally said it. "I just don't feel like myself anymore. I want to be present. I want to engage. But my body isn't cooperating the way it used to." His standard blood work looked relatively normal. His cardiovascular function was acceptable. But when I looked more closely at his internal chemistry, I found something subtle but significant. His body's pH had drifted toward the acidic side. Now, most men have never been given this information, but internal acidity, even at a mild level, creates a low-grade environment of tension within the vascular system. Your blood vessels become narrower and more rigid. Their ability to expand rapidly and deliver generous, efficient blood flow becomes compromised. Think of it like a garden hose that's been pinched in the middle. The pressure at the source remains, but the delivery is blocked. That's exactly where baking soda demonstrates its quiet usefulness. As a natural alkalizing agent, it gently nudges the body's internal pH back toward a more balanced state. When taken appropriately, typically dissolved in water on an empty stomach, it supports better blood fluidity, encourages arterial relaxation, and creates a vascular environment where oxygen and nutrients move more freely. What happened with Harold? I introduced a simple morning routine: a small amount of baking soda in warm lemon water. 3 weeks later, he came back to the office with a noticeably different energy. "Something's shifted," he said. "It's hard to describe, but it's like my body finally woke up. My wife says she can see it too." That first step, restoring internal pH balance, may sound like a minor adjustment, but it creates the physiological foundation for everything else. Blood that moves more freely delivers more oxygen, more nutrients, and more functional capacity to the tissues that depend on it. And when that balance is restored, the effects reach well beyond any single system. But restoring pH is only the beginning, because even when circulation improves, there's often another invisible obstacle still at work, and it may be doing more damage than men realize. Let's look at the second benefit, and why it may actually carry even more clinical weight than the first. Benefit number 2: reduces inflammation in blood vessels. One of the most underappreciated obstacles to male physical vitality after 60 isn't hormonal decline, it's inflammation. Slow, systemic, and persistent. I refer to it in my practice as the silent erosion. It doesn't cause obvious pain or dramatic symptoms, but over time, it progressively degrades the function of your blood vessels, reduces physical sensitivity, drains your energy reserves, and contributes to a gradual loss of physical responsiveness. Another patient who comes to mind is Samuel, 71 years old, strong-voiced and composed, but clearly carrying something heavy. "It's like my body is constantly working against me," he said. "Even when I want to feel connected to my wife, I just don't feel capable anymore." When we ran his labs, his cholesterol was managed, he wasn't diabetic, but his inflammatory markers, specifically his C-reactive protein, were elevated. That was the clinical clue. Here's what most men aren't told. Chronic, low-grade inflammation directly damages the inner lining of blood vessels, the endothelium. This is the tissue responsible for producing nitric oxide, the molecular signal that initiates vascular expansion and allows blood to move efficiently into tissues throughout the body. When inflammation compromises the endothelium, that entire signaling system gets disrupted. Blood flow becomes restricted, physical sensitivity decreases, and the body simply cannot respond the way it once did, not because the desire isn't there, but because the vascular infrastructure has been quietly compromised. That's why sodium bicarbonate has drawn increasing attention in clinical research. Multiple studies have shown that it activates anti-inflammatory pathways, particularly through interactions with the spleen and kidneys. It helps moderate the immune system's overactive inflammatory response, specifically targeting the vascular environment. And when systemic inflammation decreases, blood vessels can relax, nitric oxide production resumes, and physical responsiveness becomes possible again. Not forced, but natural. Samuel began a straightforward protocol: half a teaspoon of baking soda dissolved in water each morning, followed by a 15-minute walk. Within a month, he reported not only improved physical responsiveness in the mornings, but also meaningfully better energy and mental clarity throughout the day. "It feels like something inside me unclogged," he said. And that's precisely the experience of reduced inflammation: less internal resistance, more ease. But inflammation is only one roadblock. Even with vessels that are open and unobstructed, your body still needs the chemical signal, the green light, that initiates the physical response. That signal is nitric oxide, and baking soda plays a more important role in supporting it than most people expect. Let me walk you through how that works in the next benefit. This one may be the most clinically significant of all. Benefit number 3: supports natural nitric oxide production. If you've been wondering why your body's physical response seems delayed or diminished, why the desire is present but the follow-through isn't, the answer may come down to a single molecule your body once produced easily, but now struggles to maintain adequate levels of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the physiological spark that initiates vascular expansion. It signals smooth muscle tissue to relax, opens blood vessels wide, and directs efficient blood flow to where it's needed when physical activation begins. Without sufficient nitric oxide, the mental signal may be there, but the physical response doesn't materialize. I worked with a man named Thomas, 66 years old, reasonably healthy, still physically active. His hormones were in acceptable range. He wasn't experiencing mood issues, but during our consultation he said something I've heard many times since. "I still have the desire, doctor, but it's like there's no signal from my body anymore. Like the switch just isn't flipping." That's a near-perfect clinical description of a nitric oxide deficit. The intention is present at every level, but the vascular system isn't receiving or responding to the chemical instruction. Here's the important distinction. Baking soda doesn't contain nitric oxide directly. What it does is help create the internal conditions under which your body can produce and sustain more of it naturally. When body chemistry becomes overly acidic, nitric oxide degrades at an accelerated rate. Baking soda counteracts this by alkalizing the blood, protecting the endothelial lining, and reducing oxidative stress, all of which preserve and extend nitric oxide function. In research conducted with athletes, sodium bicarbonate supplementation was associated with measurably improved vascular performance and aerobic capacity, in part because participants were better able to utilize oxygen and generate nitric oxide under physical demand. The vascular mechanics at play are directly applicable to men's circulatory health as well. Both require rapid, expansive blood flow and responsive vessels. Thomas gave the protocol a try. We started with baking soda and lemon water each morning, paired with slow, controlled breath work, known to support nitric oxide release. A few weeks later, he came back visibly different. "I'm noticing things I haven't seen in years," he said. "And more than that, my body is finally responding again, on its own." But nitric oxide is only one part of the system. Once blood is moving, it still needs to deliver oxygen efficiently and rapidly to the tissues that depend on it. If that delivery process is sluggish, physical performance will be too. And this is another area where baking soda provides meaningful support. Let me explain in the next benefit. Benefit number 4. Improves oxygen delivery to vascular tissue. One of the most consistently overlooked factors in male physical vitality after 60 is something deceptively simple: oxygen. Not just general systemic oxygen, but the precise targeted delivery of oxygen to the specific blood vessels and soft tissues that depend on it for full expansion and responsiveness. Even when blood reaches those areas, insufficient oxygenation means that tissue cannot fully engage. The result is a weak, abbreviated, or absent physical response. I think often of Richard, 72 years old, a retired fire chief who had spent his career defined by strength, reliability, and composure. But when he sat across from me, his words carried unmistakable weight. "I feel like I'm running out of fuel, doctor. Everything's slower, heavier, duller than it used to be." His cardiovascular markers were acceptable, but one number stood out. His oxygen saturation was sitting at the low end of the normal range. This pattern isn't unusual. As we age, and particularly in the presence of internal acidity or inflammation, red blood cells lose some of their efficiency in transporting and releasing oxygen to target tissues. This is where baking soda's role becomes biochemically precise. It doesn't just reduce acidity, it actively supports the mechanism by which hemoglobin releases oxygen to surrounding tissue. In a more alkaline internal environment, hemoglobin's oxygen offloading efficiency improves. More oxygen reaches the target tissues during physical activation, which directly supports stronger, more sustained physiological response. Richard established a morning ritual: a small glass of water with half a teaspoon of baking soda, taken slowly before breakfast. Within a few weeks, he was reporting not just better overall energy, but something more specific. "It felt warmer during intimacy," he said, "like things were actually flowing again the way they're supposed to." That warmth he described is a real physiological experience, the sensation of improved oxygenated blood flow to tissues that had been undersupplied. When oxygen finally reaches its destination, the body responds with aliveness, alert, engaged, and capable. But oxygen isn't just about activation. It's also cellular fuel for the smooth muscle tissue that must remain engaged to sustain any physical response. And if those muscles are depleted of energy, the response deteriorates, even with adequate blood flow. That leads us directly to the next benefit. Benefit number 5. Boosts mitochondrial energy in smooth muscle cells. Most of the men I work with have never thought about the smooth muscle cells embedded in their vascular and penile tissue, but these cells are absolutely central to sustained physical function. They don't simply allow blood to enter, they actively hold it, maintain pressure, and sustain the physical response long enough for full engagement. And the fuel that powers them comes from one source: cellular energy. I remember Gerald clearly, 68 years old, a retired mechanic with a sharp, practical mind. At our first appointment, he looked down and said quietly, "It's not just that things don't respond the way they used to. It's that the whole system shuts down halfway through, like I just run out of gas." That description was clinically precise. When I explained that the energy-producing organelles within his smooth muscle cells, the mitochondria, were likely functioning below capacity, something clicked for him. Mitochondria convert available fuel into usable cellular energy. But under chronic conditions of acidity, inflammation, or oxidative stress, mitochondrial efficiency declines. And when smooth muscle cells are energy depleted, they cannot maintain the sustained engagement needed for full physical performance. Baking soda addresses this at the cellular level. By reducing lactic acid accumulation and supporting a more alkaline intracellular environment, it helps mitochondria function more efficiently, specifically within the smooth muscle tissue that underpins male vascular response. Gerald began taking baking soda 3 times per week, paired with light morning movement and controlled deep breathing. About a month later, he said something I've thought about many times since. "It feels like the engine's turning over again. Not perfect, but alive." That steady, quiet return of cellular energy is exactly what mitochondrial recovery feels like. And here's the broader implication. Your mitochondria aren't the only part of your system affected by internal acidity. Your hormonal environment, particularly your body's ability to respond to testosterone, is also directly shaped by your internal chemistry. Let's look at how baking soda supports that system next. Benefit number 6. Enhances testosterone receptor sensitivity. This is one of the most important conversations I have with older male patients, and it's one that the standard medical framework rarely addresses. Men come in and tell me their testosterone numbers look normal, but they still feel flat, unmotivated, and physically unresponsive. And they're not imagining it. Their levels may well be within range, but that's only half the hormonal equation. Testosterone is only effective when your cells can actually hear it, when the receptor sites on your cells are sensitive enough to detect the hormonal signal and respond to it. That's what we call receptor sensitivity, and it's a function of your internal environment, not just your hormone levels. Martin was 64, a retired law enforcement officer, physically strong, mentally clear, but quietly defeated. "They told me my testosterone was fine," he said. "So why do I still feel like nothing's working?" When I looked deeper, my suspicion was confirmed. Years of accumulated inflammation and internal acidity had desensitized his hormone receptors. The testosterone was present. The receptors simply weren't registering it with full efficiency. Think of it as having a clear radio signal, but a receiver that's no longer properly calibrated. Baking soda addresses this not by increasing testosterone production, but by improving the conditions in which your hormones operate. By reducing acidity and lowering systemic inflammation, it helps clear the hormonal interference and allows existing testosterone to connect with receptor sites more effectively. Martin started a routine of baking soda in water a few mornings per week, combined with light resistance training. About 6 weeks in, he came back with something in his eyes I hadn't seen at his first visit. "My drive is coming back," he said. "Not just physically, everywhere. It's like something switched back on." That switch wasn't from a hormone increase. It was from his body finally responding to what it already had. And now, let's look beyond hormones. Because your body's ability to maintain healthy vascular and hormonal function depends heavily on 2 organs that work quietly in the background, your liver and your kidneys. And what baking soda does in support of those organs may surprise you. Benefit number 7. Detoxifies the liver and kidneys gently. One of the most consistently overlooked reasons that men begin to experience physical, hormonal, and energetic decline after 60 is something we almost never connect to those symptoms: toxic accumulation. Over time, the body absorbs and stores a growing burden of metabolic byproducts, environmental chemicals, and spent hormones, compounds that no longer serve any biological purpose but remain in circulation, slowing down the systems they pass through. 2 organs bear the primary responsibility for clearing that burden: the liver and the kidneys. When these organs are overworked or sluggish, even mildly, the downstream effects are significant. Blood viscosity increases, hormone metabolism slows, circulation becomes less efficient, and mood, cognitive clarity, and physical vitality all begin to quietly deteriorate. I've seen this in men who appear outwardly healthy, but describe feeling fundamentally stuck, like something beneath the surface isn't processing correctly. Carlos was one such patient, 70 years old, a retired accountant, clean diet, non-smoker. But he described something precise when he came in. "I feel toxic, doctor, like something deep inside isn't right." His labs told a nuanced story: mildly elevated uric acid, early signs of kidney strain, and subtle markers of sluggish liver function. Nothing individually alarming, but collectively sufficient to explain exactly how he felt. That's where baking soda steps in, with a quiet but meaningful contribution. It reduces the acid load on the kidneys by supporting a healthier urinary pH, making the filtration process more efficient. For the liver, it supports bile flow and reduces the inflammatory burden on metabolic detoxification pathways. It works gently, appropriate for older men who need supportive intervention without systemic disruption. Carlos began using a small dose of baking soda every other morning, paired with consistent hydration and a warm lemon water ritual. 3 weeks later, his words were simple but telling. "My body feels lighter, like I'm not carrying as much." And his physical responsiveness began to return, gradually but unmistakably. When the organs responsible for processing your hormones and filtering your blood are working with greater efficiency, every other system in the body benefits. And now, let's talk about something that quietly undermines all of that progress from the outside in: belly fat, sugar cravings, and the hormonal disruption they create. Benefit number 8: reduces sugar cravings and supports weight management. If you're a man over 60, you've likely noticed this. Abdominal fat seems to resist even genuine dietary effort, and cravings for sugar or refined carbohydrates, particularly in the evening or after meals, feel more difficult to manage than they did at younger ages. This isn't a failure of willpower, it's metabolic and hormonal. Jack was 66, a former high school football coach who walked into my office, put his hand on his abdomen, and said bluntly, "This is ruining my life. I can't get rid of it, and I'm convinced it's undermining everything, my energy, my drive, all of it." He'd been eating carefully, walking regularly, cutting back on calories, but the cravings, the midsection weight, and the physical decline persisted. What most men aren't taught is that abdominal fat is hormonally active, not just metabolically inactive storage. It produces an enzyme called aromatase, which converts circulating testosterone into estrogen. The more abdominal fat a man carries, the more testosterone is diverted away from its intended functions. The hormonal cascade that follows affects desire, circulation, energy, and physical performance. Baking soda's contribution here is more indirect, but genuinely meaningful. By supporting internal pH balance, it may help stabilize blood sugar fluctuations throughout the day, reducing the intensity of sugar cravings that drive overconsumption. When blood sugar is more stable, the body's metabolic environment becomes more conducive to fat utilization, particularly around the midsection. Jack added one simple habit: baking soda with lemon water first thing in the morning, followed by a protein-forward breakfast and moderate movement. Within 4 weeks, the cravings had diminished significantly. His midsection began to respond. And perhaps most importantly, something shifted in his relationship with his own body. "I don't feel out of control anymore," he said. "When I look in the mirror, I see someone who's still in the fight." Less sugar dependency, better body composition, more balanced hormones, all feeding forward into better physical capability and confidence. But there's one more piece of the puzzle that men almost universally overlook. And it may be the most personally significant of all. Benefit number 9: helps calm the nervous system. There's a dimension of male physical vitality that rarely receives adequate clinical attention, and it isn't vascular, hormonal, or metabolic. It's neurological. If your brain and nervous system aren't aligned with the present moment, even the healthiest body can fail to respond. I've seen this across hundreds of patient consultations. Men who want to be physically present and engaged, who have genuine desire, but whose bodies simply don't follow through when the moment arrives. And in the majority of those cases, the obstacle isn't physical. It's a nervous system that's stuck in a state of chronic alert. Tom was 70 years old, retired military, composed bearing, clear eyes. But when we got to the real reason for his visit, his voice dropped. "I still love my wife deeply," he said, "but every time we get close, something in me freezes. My body just won't cooperate." This wasn't about hormone levels or cardiovascular health. This was a nervous system locked in sympathetic overdrive, the physiological equivalent of a fire alarm that won't turn off. Here's the mechanism most men aren't aware of. As we age, particularly under conditions of accumulated stress, disrupted sleep, and systemic inflammation, the balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches of the nervous system shifts. The sympathetic system, responsible for the fight or flight response, can become chronically dominant. And when that happens, the body literally redirects blood away from peripheral systems, including those involved in physical intimacy. It's a survival response operating at exactly the wrong time. Baking soda offers an unexpected but scientifically credible contribution here. By reducing systemic acidity and dampening inflammatory signaling, it supports the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, the one associated with rest, recovery, and connection. Research suggests that when the kidneys and spleen are supported by bicarbonate, they generate fewer stress-related signals to the central nervous system, contributing to a genuine reduction in overall physiological tension. Tom began using baking soda a few times per week, pairing it with the structured breathwork exercises I provided. Within a few weeks, he described something profound. "It's like my body finally feels safe enough to be present again," he said. And for him, as for many of the men I've worked with, that shift changed not just the physical dimension, but the emotional one as well. When your nervous system is calm, everything else becomes possible. You connect more fully. You respond more naturally. You recover the ease and rhythm that physical intimacy depends on. And now, what if we could take every benefit we've discussed and amplify all of them simultaneously through one simple natural pairing? Benefit number 10. Combines powerfully with lemon or apple cider vinegar. After everything we've covered, pH balance, inflammation reduction, nitric oxide support, oxygen delivery, cellular energy, hormonal sensitivity, organ detoxification, metabolic balance, and nervous system regulation. I want to share one final tool that ties all of it together. It's a natural combination I've recommended to many patients, and I consistently find that it produces the most comprehensive results. Lemon juice or apple cider vinegar paired with baking soda. On their own, both lemon and apple cider vinegar offer significant health value. They're rich in antioxidants, support healthy digestion, and contribute to blood sugar regulation. But when combined with baking soda, something synergistic occurs. The resulting chemical reaction in the body stimulates bile production, reduces systemic acidity more efficiently than either compound alone, and supports both liver function and vascular tone simultaneously. More practically, these ingredients help baking soda work more effectively, guiding its alkalizing action toward the right tissues without overwhelming the body's natural buffering systems. Barry was 74, a widower of 5 years who was beginning, carefully and hopefully, to explore the possibility of intimacy again. He described himself as rusted shut. We had talked through exercise, diet, and circulation, all the standard foundations, but something was still missing from the picture. I suggested he begin each morning with a specific ritual: 1 glass of warm water, a generous squeeze of fresh lemon, and a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, sipped slowly on an empty stomach. About a month later, he came in with an expression I won't forget. "I didn't expect much," he admitted, "but I wake up feeling genuinely alive. My digestion is lighter, my mind is clearer, and I'm physically responding again in ways I didn't think were still available to me." That combination doesn't force anything. It supports the whole system: digestive, vascular, neurological, hormonal. It brings the body back toward its natural functional balance. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.